Hello, I'm Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. I'm going to demonstrate how to make a baby quilt, and it is so easy and it's really easy to make. It will take you about a day to make it. So let's look at this adorable quilt. I wish I had a little baby right now to give it to. Got to tell my daughter to get busy. Okay, so she's going to love that comment. But anyway, here are squares of fabric now put together. Now I selected an Easter themed fabric because Easter's kind of coming and I'm sort of in the mood for Easter. So my main fabric is this Easter bunny piece. The other squares that I have here were selected from the colors within this block. So when you're picking out your fabrics, pick your main fabric first, then go and select your other complementary pieces of fabric. On the border is the yellow, okay? On the back is also the yellow. And on the border, we have this nice big rickrack fabric. It just really sets this quilt off and makes it look nice. Now, this is called fabric A, B, C, and D, and this is E. Okay, so when I'm talking about cutting instructions, you'll know what I'm referring to. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go over the cutting instructions. If you have a cell phone, put this video on pause and take a snapshot of it with your cell phone. So you'll have all the information in your phone when you go to the store to buy your fabrics, okay? Now, the finished size of this quilt is 30 by 40. This is approximate, okay? All of your squares for the top are cut the same size, 9.5. And there again, you're going to need 6 of fabric A. That's your main piece of fabric. All the others squares are 2 of each color. Then you're going to need strips of fabric cut that are 2.5 inches wide. You'll need 4 of them. If you're not sure how to cut out strips effectively, watch my video Straight Grain Binding for detailed instructions. The fabric for the back needs to be approximately 1.25 yards. Your rickrack needs to be 1.5 inches wide, and you're going to need about 4.5 yards. Now I bought my rickrack in small spools like this. There were 3 yards on each spool, and if this is all you can find, then you're going to need to buy 2 packages. Otherwise, your store may be carrying it where you can purchase it by the yard. I always like to buy a little extra just in case I measured wrong, okay? Then you're going to need 1 small package of extra loft 100% polyester quilt batting in the crib size. Now, usually those crib size packages are really oversized, and you could even make a lap quilt out of it, or even a quilt for an older child and not a baby. Now, if you are interested in making this little quilt as a doll quilt, cut your squares 4.5 inches, because this would also make a really cute doll quilt for your daughter or grandchild. Okay? All right, so let's get started on putting it all together. Now you want to lay out all of your squares in the order that you want them in. My fabric A fabric is just scattered out, and I'll show you how I placed it here. I have an A here, an A, and an A, and then another A in the center, and then on this last row here, A and A. All of your B, C, B and C, D fabrics are just scattered in between all of that, okay? All right, now you want to take your first row and take 1 block and lay it on top of the center block, center square. Pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then open it up, take your next block, bring it over the center. Pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Now you're not going to do any pressing or ironing on it just yet. Then go ahead and do your other 3 rows. So get all of your rows together first. Then you're going to lift it up and, you're going to go to the back and press it along there to flatten the seam out, and then do the same thing on the other seam, flatten it out. Now go to the front side, and with your iron you're going to push against that seam, pressing it, pushing the seam to where it goes out away from you. Then go to the next seam and do the same thing. Push it so that it goes out and away. I'm going to turn it over. See, it's going that way. Press all your seams in the same direction. So you can see here, I've got all my seams going to your left, my right. Okay? All right, so now take this row and flip it to where the seam is going in the other direction. Now it's going this way. Then take the last row and do the same thing. Okay? All right, now flip them back over to the front. Okay? And take your first 2 rows, lay it on top like that. And you're going to pin and stitch along this side. But first, you need to lock these seams in. So you need to line up your seams. And this seam is going to lie right against that seam. Okay? So lock it in. If it feels nice and flat, you don't feel any dips or any lumps, then you have it lined up correctly. Then go ahead and put a pin in it. And then do the same thing. Lock this seam in and put a pin in it. Then pin across the entire side there. Then stitch 1/4 inch. Okay, when you're done, open it up. Now you've got 2 rows stitched together. Now take your 3rd row, lay it on top. Okay, line up your seams, lock them in, pin it all the way across, do a 1/4 inch seam, open it up, and do your last row. Same thing, lock the seams, pin and stitch a 1/4 inch. Okay, now you've got your top piece almost stitched together. Now you're going to put on your border fabrics, which is the yellow in my case. Okay, now pretend that this yellow piece is in here right now. I'm going to show you how I put that on. So you lay your strip across. Now always start on the side that is the longest. This is the 4 block side. Okay, start on that side first. That's real important. Otherwise your strips may not fit very well. Okay, now place the fabric out past the raw edge here. And do the same thing on the other end. Have a little bit of an overhang on each end. Then pin and stitch 1/4 inch across the entire side. Then press it with your iron. Then take your ruler and you're going to trim off the excess. Now you're probably wondering, well, why can't I just open it up and press on the right side? For some reason, it never comes out right when you do it that way. So this is why I do it this way. Then cut. Cut the excess off on both sides. Okay, cut the excess off here. Then when you're done, you open it up to the front and press again. And you'll notice it comes out really straight. If you press it first and then trim the excess off, it always winds up fanning out to the side. Okay, so that's why I do it the other way. So do this on the opposite side. Put that strip on. Now you're going to go and put your end pieces on where the 3 blocks are. Okay, and do the same thing. Have a little bit of an overhang at each end. Pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Press it with your iron. Trim off the excess on both ends. Then open it up and press. Okay, do that on both ends, the last two sides. Now that your top piece is all put together, now you're going to take your batting. Now your your polyester batting and the fabric for the back, which is this right here, are going to be cut larger than your top piece. So cut your pieces out at least a couple of inches, 2 inches larger than the top piece. Okay, so you want to save, don't cut this out right away. Wait till you finish your top piece to see how big it turns out, and then do your other two pieces. Now, center your top piece over that. So you can see I have this excess here. Place some pins scattered around the top. You don't need a lot, just a few to hold it together while you trim your edges. So take your ruler, line it up on the edge of your top fabric. So line it up there. Then cut off your excess. Do that on all 4 sides. As you can see, I've already done it here. Okay? Now, you're going to trim these corners and make them curved and round. Okay? So take something small from your kitchen, something round. Everybody's got something round in their house. Make sure it's small. You're just going to cut maybe an inch from the corner in. It's just a slight curve. And you can either mark it with a pencil and then cut it with your scissors. I prefer rotary cutter because it just seems to come out better. So you can cut around with your rotary cutter. Okay? Do that on all 4 corners, and your corners should look like this. Nice and even. Now, you want to remove the pins that you've got scattered on top and only take off your top piece of fabric. Don't separate your other two. Leave them together. So take off this top piece. Now you're going to put the rickrack on. Okay, so I'm going to show you just on a really small piece of fabric so you get the idea. Okay. Place your first end down along the edge, and how you're going to determine how far from the edge to place it. You see here where it's curved like this? You want to have about 1/4 of an inch of your top fabric exposed. So it should be showing. So about 1/4 of an inch from this raw edge, place it down. And begin pinning it all the way around. Now when you come to your corners, don't tug real hard on the rickrack. It is a little forgiving. It has a little bit of flexibility in it, so you should be able to get around that corner all right. Still make sure you keep a little bit exposed there so you know you've got it about right. Okay. Now, when you have 2 ends that come together, and if you're buying them off those small spools like I did, there will be 2 times you will have to do this next technique. It's real easy. Okay, so pin everything down. Now your 2 ends are together. Pull this first end out like that, okay? Then take this other end and overlap it. And then place a pin right here, okay? Now, when you start stitching, you're going to pull this out and start stitching right here. But don't stitch over this end piece. Pull it out and away and stitch across, okay? Now, stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this curve here. So here's my stitch line. I apologize for not using darker thread. I had a lapse of thinking at that moment. But here's my stitch line right here. You're going to start in about 1/8 of an inch and stitch all the way around, okay? And remember, make sure these are pulled out when you stitch across. Now you're going to have some of this as excess. So go ahead and trim about half of it off. Don't trim it too short because you can see it does unravel, okay? All right, now that you've got your rickrack on, now you're going to go back and place it on top of the backing fabric and your batting, okay? Lay it down, okay? And of course, don't keep pins in there like that. Make sure you remove those pins. All right, so line it all up. Line your edges back up again. Now they may not fit exact. Don't fret over it. It'll be fine, okay? All right, so go ahead and pin it all the way around, except on one side, you're gonna leave about a 10-inch opening. So take a pin and place a pin on one side of the opening, and take a pin and place it on the other side of your opening. And then you're going to start with this first, over by this first pin. So, you see the stitch line here? This is the stitch line that holds the rickrack on. You're going to stitch right on top of that stitch line. Just go right over it and go all the way around. And when you start, do a few stitches to secure it. When you come around, stop here, do a few stitches to secure it. Then you're going to turn it right side out. So reach in between your bottom fabric, which is my yellow polka dot, and the top piece. Reach inside and begin turning it right side out. Now, I'm going to get my full-size quilt here. Now we just have a few more steps. They're easy, they're not difficult to do. You want to go ahead and pin your opening close. Now you might need a few extra pins, so you're going to fold your bottom fabric inside, okay? And then pin it here. Then you want to continue pinning around by getting your edges flat, because this batting is very fluffy, and in order to do this next step you want to flatten it a little bit. So what I do is pull on the rickrack a little bit, tug on it, and put a pin in there. Then go over a little bit, tug on it, and put a pin, and go all the way around. Then you're going to do a little stitch along the edge here. It's less than 1/8 of an inch. It's really narrow. Go all the way around, and of course remove your pins as you go along. Then you're going to do stitch in the ditch. And stitch in the ditch is where two pieces of fabric come together. So between the border and your squares is a ditch, and between each square is a ditch. Okay, so you're going to do stitch in the ditch. You're actually going to stitch right in there. Now, you really need to have a walking foot to do this. You could do it with a regular presser foot, but you may not like your results because you might get little tucks all over it, okay? And before you stitch, you want to use these safety pins. Now some people like to use large basting stitches to hold all the layers together, but I don't do that. I usually will use pins. Now there are quilting safety pins. They're very expensive. I don't think they're worth the money, and you don't get a lot of pins in the package. You get just a few. So I just use regular straight pins because they're a lot cheaper. Okay? Now you're going to start on the end where the 3 squares are, and you're going to do these first 2 center rows first. So stitch along here and go all the way to the end, then go over to the other one all the way to the end. Then do your 2 outer ones, one on each side, okay? Then you're going to turn the quilt and you're going to do the other side. Now you're going to start down, you're going to start at the other end, but I'm going to show you how to prepare this. You're going to roll it up. This is a really easy technique to use so that you can control your fabric when you are stitching, okay? So this part here goes into your machine, and now here your needle is right here. Okay, you're going to start up here and stitch all the way down. Then, once you finish that row, unroll it and stitch on the next line. Unroll it again. Now start rolling it up on the other side. You're going to find it so much easier to control your fabric. And stitch again. Then unroll and roll. Stitch again. Unroll and roll. And do your last row. And then you are done. And this is such an adorable baby quilt. Isn't it cute? And really, it doesn't take all that long to make it. Well, I hope that that was helpful to you. Now, to keep informed on all my future videos, click on one of my subscribe buttons. You might have seen a red one float down in the right-hand corner. It says subscribe on it. And then towards the end of my video, you'll begin to see my face floating around up here. That is also a subscribe button. So click on one of those. And the next time, and then YouTube will ask you for your email address. You enter that information, and then the next time I have a new video, YouTube sends you that email telling you I've got that new video. You click on the big button in the side of it, and it takes you directly to my next video. I'm Cheryl. I'm really glad you came to my sewing room. Now see you next time, and happy sewing.